All right, prime properties, learning activity number 3. Follow along. Nope, down here. Follow along and work through the prime properties handout with the instructor. The midterm next week will be very similar. And I will be recording this. So let's see what we have. At the top of your handout, you have a wireframe that is showing you how they are organizing this content. Notice at the top, they call it site logo. They didn't call it header, but that's fine. That's just where, if we were to apply some styles to anything in a site logo, we'd need to have it wrapped in tags of that so that it can be stylized. We aren't doing style, but we need to code that way. Then you can see in the wireframe, there's a navigation section, and then a content section, and then we have a footer. In Notepad++, let's close out any tabs that you might have open. So we don't have Pacific Trails or Trillium or anything still open. And then let's go to our desktop or your jump drive or however you want to store this. We're starting something brand new. So step 1 says create a folder called Prime. And this is where everything is going to live. So I'm going to put this new folder on my desktop. The name of it is Prime. All right, back in Notepad, we are going to start a new web page with the following specifications. So what we first have to remember is there's that certain part of all web pages that we have to use the certain skeleton. So why don't we look and see if we have a good starting point? So I would say do a file open and navigate to wherever you've stored things. I have a homework folder on my desktop. And in there, I have a couple of things. One's called index, one's called starting file. Those might be a good starting point of that basic skeleton. So I'm going to see what this one looks like. I think I'm going to prefer the other one. So file, open, index. All right. This looks pretty darn close to being that basic skeleton. Whatever you have, or if you want to start with the index of one of your recent sites, you need to delete out things to clean it up to this basic skeleton. So the important things are, in the top comments, the doc type, we're telling people that this is an HTML document in human terms. The second line down is our opening HTML tag, and specifically if the language is English. And at the very bottom of the page, we close out the HTML. Then we have our head section where search engines and browsers look for information. And inside of that, we have a title and our character set. And then we have our opening and closing body tags. So this is the overall shell of an index page. Once you have it where you want it, and it's a good clean place to start, I need you to do a file, save as. We're still going to name it index, but we're going to put it in that folder that we just made called Prime. Because remember, it has to be. And make sure you also give it a .html extension. HTML. There we go. So file, save as, and in the Prime folder, we have an HTML document called index. Everybody good? All right. So figure 2.40 shows in general how it's going to look and how you're going to code this page to look very similar to this. Every now and then there might be spaces. If you can see on their screenshot, it says, we can also help you find the property that meets your needs, and then there's a bunch of space before the bullet points start. If they don't tell you to code for a break tag there, don't worry about it. If you want to put one in so that it matches the look of this, that's fine also. All right, so at the bottom of this page, in Notepad, create a web page with the following specifications. The web page itself should use a descriptive page title. The company name is always a good choice for a business address. So up in our head section, this is what appears in our browser tabs and on search engine results. We're going to give it a title. What's a good title for this one? Prime Properties. That's the name of the company. Perfect. All right. Then we have things that are visible on our web page. Those go in your body tag, correct? All right, it says Next is in the logo area, use an H1 for the Prime Properties logo. So what they're saying about the logo area, if you look back at the wireframe at the top of this page, so far what it's looked like when we've done these has been header. That's the word we're familiar with seeing. But in this case, it's going to be site logo. So that's going to be our opening tag is site logo. And then go down a few lines and close it out. In the past, this has been header, something like that. If we were to use CSS to style this, we would call that up as our selector and then tell it how to look, but we're not writing CSS. So inside here, it says use an H1 to use the Prime Properties logo, which is basically just the words Prime Properties. So in the heading 1, we're going to do Prime Properties. And then close out the heading 1. I'm going to take the space out of my site logo tag just because I think it's a little bit cleaner and they light up correctly better when there's no space in them. So again, that normally said header or something like that. So stylize in an H1, we have the Prime Properties logo. Then we have a navigation section. So an opening nav tag, and go down a few lines and close out your navigation. And inside your navigation, they say configure the following text to display in bold. Use the strong stylizing element. And it's going to display this within a paragraph. So left to right, it's going to say home, listing, financing, and contacting. Contact, it's not plural. But they want it all in bold, right? So what's the next tag we use? Strong. Thank you. Eric. And we can close that out at the end. That way, everything we put between it is going to be stylized in bold, but emphasize strong when the screen reader reads it. And then we're going to actually have our words. And they want home, listings, financing, and contact. At this point, let's save our document and take a peek at it, which is kind of good practice to make sure that you're on track as you move along. Okay, if I look at this visually, do you see any difference from their handout to what I'm seeing?
It's underlined, spaced out more.
Yeah, the underlining we're going to get to because we're going to make them actual hyperlinks, but the spaced out more is the part that I wanted you to notice. So do you guys remember the code that you use to put in a non-breaking space right here? It's something funky, right?
Isn't that little fans and something?
Yep, it's the and sign, the ampersand,
Yeah.
and then non-breaking space, NBSP semicolon. That will give you a nice actual space. So you can copy and paste that between your words here. By doing that, I got a little bit more breathing room in here, so I can see that that worked. All right, moving on. The next thing they want us to do is I have so many documents in front of me, I'm getting dizzy. They want us to code anchor tags so that the home page links to index.html, listing links to a listing page, and financing to a finance page. So inside our navigation, just to make this visually more pleasing, I'm going to push all of these down a line. I'm not putting in a non-breaking space, therefore they're still going to appear left to right, but I think it's easier to add your code when it's a little bit cleaner like this. So they want the home page to link to something. So do you guys remember how we do that? The anchor tag A is the most important, or not the most important, but that's what actually gets it to anchor. And then we're going to say href equals, and then in quotes, the name of the file they want us to go to. So in this case, it is index.html, end quote, whoops, that's not the end quote, and then closing caret, and then the word home is what's actually going to be hyperlinked and wrapped in those A tags. So after the word home, we need to do our closing anchor tag. So the word home is wrapped in anchor tags and specifically goes to the index.html page. You can then do that with the next page down, anchor href equals. They want that one to go to a page called listings.html, end quote, end caret, and then after the word listings, we're closing out the anchor tag. And financing, same thing. That is going to financing.html. End quote, end caret, and then close your anchor tag. And then finally, the contact page goes to contact.html. After we close out the anchor tag on the contact, we don't need to have a non-breaking space because that's our last item. And when we save this and look at it, it should still display left to right because we don't have any break codes. I just bump them down a line for easier editing and proofreading. Whoops. I don't know what I just ran that in, but there we go. So you can see that they're now hyperlinks. They're underlined. They're in blue if we've never visited them, and they're in purple if we've visited them. That's just the browser default for hyperlinks. All right, so we have so far done our site logo area and our nav area. Let's go down and do the next area on our wireframe layout that they have us creating is the content area. So we'll do an opening tag for content, and we'll go down several lines and close that out. So between these two tags is the stuff that typically changes page by page. So far the header and the navigation and the footer stay the same, but the content changes. So the next bullet point says in content, place each line of text shown below in its own paragraph. So what tag do we use? P. P. Everybody loves P. All right, so we'll go ahead and type that in and put paragraph tags around each sentence. So the content bullet point has these 3 paragraphs, and they asked you to do each one in their own paragraph, even though they're only single sentences. The thing about that is that there's automatically a little bit of white space added above and below each paragraph, so it is going to give us a visual separation between each of those, even though they're only one line. And then after you've closed out that last one, it says, place the following content into an unordered list. So what's the opening tag for that?
UL.
Unordered list. UL. I misheard you, I'm sorry. So open and close your unordered list, UL. And then remember that each bullet point inside there has to be wrapped in list item tags, LI tags. So use an opening LI and write in the thing that they want, location, and close the list item. And do that for all 3 of the bullet points. And I'm going to close that in just a second. Sometimes I like to copy and paste. It's faster and safer if you have the code right. So under that 3rd paragraph, we have an unordered list with 3 bullet points. And again, it's good practice to save the file and check it. Make sure everything looks good. And we do have our 3 individual paragraphs. And because this third one is a paragraph, that's why it configured that extra white space below, because a paragraph puts some white space above and below the paragraph. So because of that, our unordered list is down with a little bit of white space there, and that's perfectly fine. That's what they asked us to do. All right, then the next bullet point in our handout says the contact information, which is still in our overall content div. They want the address and phone number should display in small text. Use the small physical style element. So this next stuff that we're going to do is going to be wrapped in small tags, because that's how they want it. Down a few lines and close out the small. And then inside of these small tags, they want the address. And the way they show it to you, each entry is on a new line. So we're going to have to use a special code to get that. And what is that code that bumps us down?
BR.
BR for break. I'm going to go down to another line as I type, and that's just for my own happiness. The break code is going to do it for me in the actual web page. So just remember that hitting enter on your Notepad++ doesn't cut it. And we need that break code after each line. But not after the last one necessarily. Okay. So that should have successfully coded the address to show up small and on 4 separate lines. And it did. So that is the end of the content section. So if you have your closing content tag a ways down, you can pull that back up. So now everything between here and here is our content section. That's just for that wireframe, and then later if we were stylizing it, we could tell everything in the content section to, be on a yellow background or something like that. That's why we use those tags. Is everybody up to this point? All right. Finally, in our handout, it asks us to make a footer. So we need to code in a footer down here. So your opening footer tag and your closing footer tag. And inside the footer, they say put the following information in small text size and emphasized font. Use small and M tags. And they have the copyright, the symbol, the year, and prime properties. So copyright, and then the symbol for that is ampersand copy semicolon, C-O-P-Y semicolon, and then the year, and then the company name. They want everything in the footer to be stylized small and M, so we can wrap the words copyright in that right away. I didn't start with that, but we can go back and do that. Small and emphasis. And then after the words copyright, we can close out the emphasis first, because you close them in the opposite order, and then close out the small tag. Then they say place your name in an email link on the line under the copyright information. I'm going to include this. You can see my notes say also make this small and emphasized. So I'm just going to actually add a break code after the prime properties so that it's forced down a new line. And I'm going to add my email address stuff right here. So the words that we want to see would be your email address. That would actually show, or your name. I'm sorry, we're going to do your name and then we're going to have it hyperlinked to an email link. So your name is the words that actually show up. But then to get it to be a working email hyperlink, we need to wrap it in anchor codes that take us somewhere. So anchor, and then href equals, and then in quotes, whoops, get back here, mail to, all run together, semicolon, and then the actual email address. End quote, end caret. That's your opening anchor tag. And then after your name, you need to close out the hyperlink, \A. So the anchor is href to mail to, semicolon, and then your actual email address, and all that is in quotes. After that's done and the hyperlink anchor is closed, the emphasis and the small is also closed out for the footer. So both the copyright and your name are going to be closed out as emphasis and small. And this is what we get. So if we look at this, is there anything visually that's kind of annoying or doesn't match what we see on that screenshot on the first page?
The phone number is too close for copyright.
Yep, the phone number, they have a space there, and then what else? Copyright kind of hits pretty fast too, doesn't it? So let's add some spaces to our code. So in the phone number, let's add one or two more breaks here, probably just one. We'll do the trick. That'll pop it down a line, 2 lines. And then before our footer hits in, we're going to want some breaks there too. So maybe after the phone number up here, we're going to code in a handful of breaks as well. Maybe 2 will do the trick. Break, break. And you can see how it looks there. That's better. So by adding 2 breaks after the Illinois part, we got that space before the phone number, and then by adding 2 breaks after the phone number, we also got that breathing room before the footer shows up. And this footer should be an active hyperlink. If you hover over your name, down in the lower left part of the browser down here, you should see it pop up and say mail to and your email address. If you clicked on that, it should work. It should take you to an email, your default email program. So based on those first directions, we just coded from scratch this page, Prime Properties, and this is how it should look. Right. I'm going to zoom out on this so that you can see a lot of the page at once. This is really teeny tiny, but if things are working, when you click on your opening tag, like I told you, it lights up in purple, and the lower one should light up also, the closing tag. If you click on your head tag, it should highlight the closing tag. This is a super quick way of checking your information and making sure that it looks good before you even send it to the HTML validator, for example. Another thing that just happened, and this happens to everybody, so if you forget that end quote, see how UTF-8 should be wrapped in quotes? Forget it. Now look at how everything changed their coloring. And you're like, I don't understand. I have an opening head, I have a closing head. What's the problem? A good tip is that when things go bad, it goes bad at the next character that is encountered after the error. So the error was here, so things start going bad here. So go back a line and look and see if there's an error before that, because clearly she has both opening and closing head tags, but because the quotation mark was forgotten here, it screwed up, and that's where things went bad, and it couldn't read beyond that. So that's another helpful hint. Also, when you run it through a validator, if it tells you that there's an error on line 19, quite often the error happened on the line above it, and that's where it hit problems and couldn't keep reading. So look at the line it tells you, or perhaps the line above it. So everybody have this clean? Let's run it through that HTML validator, because let's assume maybe you did have some problems. So if you forget the website, it's an easy Google search of HTML validator. And this first one is what you want, the validator.w3.org. Remember, there's a validator for HTML, and there's a separate one for CSS. They don't check each other's work. They're opposite things. So make sure you're on the HTML validator. and then validate by file upload. So you would navigate on your desktop to where that prime folder is. Here's the index page. I want it to check for me. I say open and check. So one thing it's telling me is element site logo is not allowed as a child element of body on line 8. And then it's also saying something else. But remember how I told you if you have multiple errors, always start at the top because we can fix one thing and have both of these go away. So I want to go back to my code. And I did notice that site logo is not lighting up the way everything else is, right? You guys having that issue too?
Yeah.
Okay. What if we make this be what we're used to seeing, header, and we close it out as header? Certainly lit up better, right? So typically you can name things how you want to, but there are some universal naming strategies that we should employ. And this is typically called the header. So even though this one has it wireframed out as site logo, you know that that's really the header and you can change that. So on your midterm that I'm going to give you, if the wireframe says site logo, I'm going to actually write in their header. I'm going to swap it out so that this happens this way. So save the file, and I'm going to go back to the validator, and I'm going to run it, or choose the file again. Hopefully, I only have to go back. Choose a file, index. Ugh. Gotta say okay, not cancel. I still have a problem. Content not allowed as a child element of body.
So it doesn't like content doesn't have fit.
That is bizarre. Line 21, column 2. Line 21. Does not like content. All right, what other words have we had here? Div or main? All right, let's try div. And then close it out as a div. We've done main before as well. Save. Go back to your validator. Index, okay, check. Picky, picky, picky. Likes its own words. So I'm going to double check your midterm handout, and I'm going to make those changes so that you guys don't get screwed over by something stupid like this, because that's not fair. So I did get a clean bill of health here. So that's the page we want to save, and we're able to move on to the second page of the website, which is just the rest of this handout. And basically it's page 2, it's the financing page, and there's some directions, and then they show you a screenshot of it. Yep.
Can you come look at my div didn't work?
Change whatever it was, make sure that you close it out with the exact same words.
I know.
All right. Bottom half of that second page of your handout is the financing page, and it says, you know, the good way of making this, because you've already got your whole page set up. The only thing that's going to swap out is that middle section, which we now call the div instead of content. This is the part that's going to change on the next page. So good practice is just to use this. So we're going to do a file, save as, and in that exact same prime folder, we're going to make a new page called financing.html. Make sure you spell it right, because remember in your navigation code, you spelled it a certain way, and it has to be the same or it won't work. So financing.html. And then we're going to come in here, and the first thing we're going to do is modify the page title. And we're just going to put after the name of the business, 2 colons, and then the word financing. Then we're going to come into this div, which used to be our content section. This is the main part of the page, and we're just going to wipe out all of it. So we're going to start with an empty div section. So if this is our financing page and we save it and take a look at it after we cleaned it up, we basically have our header, our navigation and our footer, nothing in between it. So that's what we want to do now is clean or add to that so that there's actually information in there. So inside the div, they want us to add content to the financing page. We're going to first start with an H2 element that says financing. Close out the H2, so wrap that word in those tags. And then we're going to have a paragraph, so P, and then type in the paragraph they have there. We work with many area mortgage and finance companies. Period and paragraph. And then finally, configure the following phrase with an H3. So in H3 tags, we're going to have mortgage FAQS. Frequently asked questions. And close out the heading 3. If you forget to do that, everything after it's still going to be at heading 3 size. And then on the next page, they want you to use a definition list to configure those questions. So a definition list needs 3 tags. The whole entire thing is wrapped in DL tags. And then individually, each term or question is wrapped in DTs, and each answer or definition is wrapped in DDs. A lot of people forget the opening and closing DL definition list. The whole shebang has to be wrapped in DL tags. So I recommend you do that first, and then close out the DL a few lines down. So now anything I put between these 2 tags is going to be part of my definition list. And the first thing is the term, the DT. In this case, it's the question, the frequently asked question. What amount of mortgage do I qualify for? And you close that with a closing DT tag, that's your term. I'm going to go down a line, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And the answer is in DD tags, that's the definition. And you can type that next sentence in the definition in the DD tags. When you're done with that explanation, make sure you close out the DD tag. So there are 3 different questions and answers they want you to type in. All right, so once you've typed in your definition list, make sure it's wrapped in opening and closing DL tags. Make sure that each term is wrapped in DTs. And each definition or answer is wrapped in DD tags. So again, it's helpful to use your cursor, click on the tag, make sure that the opening and closing tags light up in purple. And that is the last thing on that page within your main content or this div. So after the definition list closes, that div closes. We're done with that content section. Our footer remains exactly the same. We didn't change anything there. So that should be the end of that page. You should be able to save it and take a look at it visually. We have the word financing is a heading 2. We have a paragraph. The word mortgage, FAQS, is a heading 3. It's a little bit smaller. And we have our definition list that automatically is going to indent your answer or the definition. That's the way they work. If, for example, you wanted the definitions themselves to be bold, or if you see that, you would just simply code that right inside your definition term. You would also wrap that in strong tags, for example. It didn't ask for that, nor does it show it on the screenshot, so we're good. The only thing we should do now is also validate this. It looks good, but I found out last time that that didn't mean a lot, so I want to validate again. So I would choose a file, and I would now validate my financing page. And this is what you want to see, the green happiness. So, are there any questions or concerns? Because this is almost exactly what I'm going to give you next week for your midterm. If there's confusing points like site logo and content, I'm going to rename those header and div so that that isn't an issue. Does anybody have any questions? So, if we go back and look in Blackboard, there's one last ditty of homework. And this is where you finally get to put all of this together. So, you need to create a simple 3-page website for your business. Do you guys remember those businesses that you all started before we went down this rabbit hole of HTML? So using this basic simple layout like we did with Prime Properties, Pacific Trails, Trillium, any of those, I want you to make an index page, just your home page, and then I want you to make 2 interior pages. Simple. Keep it simple like this, okay? HTML based. Then I also want you to make an external style sheet. So at the top of all 3 pages in the head section, you're going to have that link that tells it that there's an external style sheet, like we did with Pacific, like we did with Trillium. You're going to have to save that style sheet in that same folder. And I want you to use some of the things you've used in the past few weeks. So I'm not going to say how big it has to be or how easy, but I want you to stylize at least 3 things. Up to you what they are. So think about colors that could be the background of your header. Maybe your navigation has a color behind it. Maybe you want to stylize a font. Maybe you want to get brave and put in a picture or 2. Remember, if they're floating in your folder free floating, they don't have to have the word images in front of them. But if you make an images folder, then remember that when you call up that picture, you say images / and then the name of that picture. And it all has to live in that same folder. Okay? You're going to zip that folder and upload it. And here's the kicker, by Sunday at midnight. Because, yes, I want Monday to look at this and grade it and get you feedback before the midterm on Tuesday. If you're having any issues, I want to be able to give you feedback before then. So that's why we have an earlier due date. Okay? So that's your only homework, and you can start with any of these shells. So what we just typed in is pretty good to go, right? Minus changing some words. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. You can go directly to this Prime Properties page. Go to your index page in Prime Properties and clean it up. Take out some of the junk that doesn't make sense. And then save it as a clean index file in a brand new folder that you name the name of your own business. And then you've got the basic bones ready to go. You can just start putting in content or lists. So you're going to want to think this out first. You're going to want to think, what basic stuff do I want on my home page? And what are 2 interior pages that I might want? Some simple things are a contact page is simple, and maybe services or a product that you sell or something like that. This does not, I don't expect this to even look good at all. I gotta be honest with you. This is pure code. It's gonna be ugly. Cool thing is, I'm gonna show you some software in the next weeks that'll make a really pretty website for you without you coding. So just keep it simple, keep it like a Trillium, a Pacific Trails level simple, and make 3 basic pages. Your site may need 10 to be a true website. That's fine. I only want you to show me that you can do 3 of them. Index and 2 others. Are there any questions on that? No? Okay, so that's your homework by Sunday so that I can give you feedback. And then next week in class, you'll be given a handout very much like this. And you'll start making this. Zip it and put it in Dropbox, and that's that. Okay? All right.